We are in a different state than we were in 1987, 99, 2008, and 2020. And in the last two of those, 2008 and 2020, we had quantitative easing. And in the last one, which was the CV19, the ability to fund was broken as a result of the excessive degree of quantitative easing and funding, and it broke the debt system. And what that actually means now is that everybody who goes, oh, nothing bad will happen, they'll just print, and everybody's in that camp or in the comment sections often. They don't fully understand the mechanism about print.
Welcome to Discourse with Christian. I'm your host, Christian White, and today is a returning guest, Francis Hunt. Of course, he's known as the market sniper. It's an honor to have him back on. Francis, how you doing?
Glad to be back, Christian. How are you keeping?
I'm keeping busy, learning more and more about all these nuances to this world of finance and such. Wanted to start off asking you kind of your current macro take on things as it relates to the financial markets and global economy, things of that nature.
Well, the backdrop is debt devaluation, particularly on the long end. So that's on Treasuries. So some people, sometimes when I hear people say, well, he says a lot of dangerous things. I'm not here to sell doomer headlines. Actually, a positive message is a far better sell message. Generally, to say something positive is more inspiring. So I don't take highlighting the dangers we're in as like, oh, I'm just really get off on just black pill stuff, and it's all just falling apart and drama and all of that. It's not my nature. It's not in my nature. People told us that planes were going to fall out of the sky in '99. I wasn't in that camp at all. I'm not someone who was like afraid of flying or anything like that. So before making what is quite an extreme case, I just want to say I don't feel the need to live on the extreme. I don't feel the need to have the most extreme story or narrative all the time. With that clarification, we are in a different state than we were in 1987, 99, 2008, and 2020. And in the last two of those, 2008 and 2020, we had quantitative easing. And in the last one, which was the CV19, the ability to fund was broken as a result of the excessive degree of quantitative easing and funding, and it broke the debt system. And what that actually means now is that everybody who goes, oh, nothing bad will happen, they'll just print, and everybody's in that camp or in the comment sections often. They don't fully understand the mechanism about print. Quantitative easing was used in Japan first. It was a name given by Prof. Werner to proliferating of money. Essentially, it means devaluation of fiat that actually devalues debt, which is what Japan needed at that time, having borrowed too much. And it's something we've used in 2008 and in 2020. And in 2008, they didn't do enough. We were in a real depression. They called it the Great Recession. There's no such economic definition as the Great Recession. But anyway, they made up a new name. And that was QE1, 2, 3. None of it was enough. We limped. 2009 was a horrible year. 10, 11, 12 wasn't much better. And in actual fact, it took till about 2016, 17 before there was some degree of meaningful recovery. And the key thing is that was brought about by the consequence of the QE, but it took a long time to take effect. There was just too much damage done post the subprime event to just V-shape bounce back. So when we had the CV19 events, they went in hard. They went in at trillions instead of billions, and they also made direct payments to the end consumer, because one of the reasons why we limped out of 2008 is they made banks whole, who stopped lending to consumers, and consumers never recovered. So that meant consumer stocks and everything else didn't really move. People weren't spending, and actually they were wrecked. Their debt was too much. Everyone was doomed out. So it's short. You had a doom loop of consumer confidence that never came back. So this time they went far larger, and they also paid some funds in terms of furlough payments and stimmy checks, etc., to get a little bit of heat in the economy at the consumer level. That's why we got a bit more of a V-shaped recovery than was the events of 2008, which actually ran almost for a decade before we had fully recovered. And I say fully recovered in and in nominal terms. Don't forget that dollar had been devalued immensely. So what's happening now was your question. So let's answer it. But just a bit of history was necessary. The real issue we have is that treasuries, if we take you to the charts, are actually losing value, particularly the long end. They're losing value fast, and the credit markets are big problems. That's JP Morgan, Jamie Dimons of JP Morgan making that statement, not me. So again, I'm going to say certain things, but I'm also going to tell you there's other people that know better, that are actually involved, that have made the same statement. So I'm just listening, some of which we'd actually concluded well before he made the statement. But nonetheless, it's encouraging to have other people corroborate what we're saying. So we also had, let's get that chart up and just show you that. And I'm going to bring up the US. Let's just go the 30-year, which is the long end of American interest rates. What's actually been happening in the more recent time is that you're very, very close. 30 years is a typical amount of borrowing period that a homeowner would take. You know, if you bought a property, you might have a 30-year mortgage. This is deeply relevant for the property market. And as you can see, we're almost at the previous highs that were of mid-23. Since the turn in rates. This is your turn in rates. That's CV19, the all-time low in rates. It's a final capitulation. We called it trend change. We said the 40-year bull market is over. So bear in mind, as this goes up, the value of the bond is going down, the inverse relationship of bonds and interest rates. So when you're near the high and you're just being rejected and you're trading at 4.9, that's pretty expensive interest rates. Don't forget margins are applied to that before you get your actual fix on your loan, your creditworthiness. You could be looking at 6.5%, 7% as a buyer right now. After many people bought those properties when they were paying mortgage rates of 4.5. So that's quite a lot more expensive. It's 50% more expensive, and it's a bad economy. And most of the boomers already have their homes. The average age, though, for the buyers now is 57, when normally it should be 31. That tells you that it's unaffordable. We're at record highs of unaffordability. It's not because the prices are the absolute highest, but the affordability is function of price, which are very high, not necessarily absolute highest. Interest rates, which are high compared to the last decade and a half. Underwriting, far more strict now. They don't want to originate loans. They're refusing a lot of credit. They're putting on bigger margins, the banks, because they know the risks coming are of a further increase in rates hikes. So they think that the cycle's turned and they're going to be facing higher rates. So affordability is function of price, income of the buyer, underwriting risk, increased margins by bank when they're uncertain. So they want more fat in the deal in case you don't pay. They want higher deposits. And at the same time, you're looking at an environment where unemployment is creeping up, and your potential certainty about holding your job is weaker. The value of the property and the asset is likely to be flat or down. That means they might have to repossess that, but how much of the money that they've spent funding you would they recoup if they had to do a forced sale? All of these aspects are making it the least affordable property market, which is why the average age is 57, not 31. And this is the long end of rates. So yes, we might come back a little bit, but overall, my opinion here is that we're going to be going higher on debt. So you're going to go there. You might have some degree of pullback to here, but you may well very soon be finding yourself getting a squeeze like that and a rip to the upside on debt valuation. So that's down on debt, higher to borrow. And you look at bankruptcies, record highs. You look at repos, you look at sellers to buyers in the property markets now. A lot of properties coming to the market. You look at the diminished returns of Airbnb. So you're going to have a property-based correction, which is going to also affect banks in terms of, so people that think the share market will be insulated from a debt-based crash, like it's a separate silo. Many of the companies in the stock market borrowed to pay dividends because it was cheaper than issuing stock because it was so cheap to borrow at one point, and the banks were so happy to lend money and build a loaning book and securitize it. A lot of that's going to come back and bite people in the stock market. Tech doesn't like high interest rates. Your Mag 7 is the stock market at the moment to a large degree. So there's a lot of bearish headwinds building, and you're sitting in the US as a nation that overspends consistently to its income and has done for decades, supposedly came in on an austerity vibe and doggy. Elon Musk's already been kicked out and sent on his merry way to play with his battery cars and all the other businesses he supposedly runs. And at the same time, you're passing the big, beautiful bill, which is all about stimulate, spend more, cuts later. Because politically, it's not expedient to cut. And on top of that, you've got the boomers that are taking out of the economy, are of massive population, all relying on a much smaller generation behind them to pay for their retirement after living the long best life with many a bubble and a boom to chase. So it's a terrible economic environment. It's going to lead to a massive devaluation in living standards. And they won't cut the social Medicaid and welfare because that would be political suicide. Boomers vote. So they're going to keep this massive ball of debt leaning on the generation X, right the way back to millennials, Z, etc., all sat carrying, where once there was one person, there was one pensioner and 14 working citizens. Now you're at about 3. So they've all got to carry these fat boomer pensioners. And you're looking at transgenerational theft. You're looking at so many different angles. Chronic over expenditure. So you have two nations. Now, China's over indebted, but in terms of its GDP, it's probably not as bad as the US, despite a horrible property market boom and bust surge. But they are a producer, and they produce more than they consume. And with the difference, they stack gold. America consumes more than it produces, and that extra is put on debt that it relies on everyone else to buy. They don't want to buy it anymore, and that as asset is going down, and they can't afford to pay the interest on that over expenditure anymore. And Trump is spending more and is committed and bragging about $1 trillion in the military. So the overspending is guaranteed to continue. And as I've used the analogy before, the snowball is hitting the village. There is no reversing this. You don't stop it halfway down the hill. You start it rolling, it gets bigger, it picks up big rocks and ice, and it's getting ever bigger. It's halfway down the hill, it's accelerating, it's massive. The village gets hit. Unfortunately, there was a Swiss village that was swamped recently, so maybe I'm going to have to choose a different analogy, because I don't want to invoke pain on people that in a real event that has occurred. But it's very few better analogies, and the best thing to do is to leave the village, because you are going to get clattered, saying, well, I've saved better. Well, you're going to be surrounded by people that haven't. You're going to be surrounded by people whose living standards are going to be going down. They're going to get angry. They're going to steal. It's going to be justifiable theft because I'm hungry, because I don't have what you have. You're white privileged, or you're boomer privileged, or you're whatever. Slice and dice and divide the economy of citizens in any way you like. You're, by gender, by whatever, by region, by history, by ethnicity. You're going to have a lot of angry people that are going to want to loot and martial law, and then you're going to go into totalitarianism. That's where I think this ends, because there's no way we turn it around. You cannot put the genie back in this bottle. You cannot take that massive snowball of kilotons that's halfway down the hill, and just spread it out and put it back like it was before it started to collapse. There's no turning the avalanche around. So we're going to sit and watch a slow motion car crash. And I'm not sure there's too much we can do about it apart from managing our own personal finances and talking to as many people as possible, like I'm doing with you now, as to what they should be doing to ensure that's one less rioter and one more person that owns an ounce or half an ounce or a 20th of an ounce of gold, because that's the beginning of actually having some form of hedge against the chronic devaluation in debt and fiat currency. So there's quite a lot in there, and I'll let you absorb that and come back at me.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you perhaps some potential triggers that would exacerbate or more quickly hasten your thesis. That could happen, whether that's some false flag event or geopolitical thing, or something with the Japanese carry trade, which I know you've mentioned about previously. Could you expand perhaps some things that you're watching and things that you're hypothesizing will invariably lead to what your thesis is?
Any of those that you mentioned are very good examples, actually. So you almost answered your own question there. I did also give one: keep spending like there's no restraints. The big beautiful bill is exactly that. And later the cuts come, always later for some other politician who will never happen. So politicians don't survive by delivering cuts. And in fact, it's part of the controlled demolition. Each particular cycle is to ensure that they break a very good system. Actually, capitalism, the real true capitalism, which is not what we have a cacocracy at the moment. You've just had Binance SEC charges be dropped after they agreed a 2 billion onboarding of USD1, which is Trump's stable coin, with the Middle Eastern contingent. After Trump visited Saudi, you've had Justin Sun, who feared being arrested in America at one point, is now going for dinners with Trump, having committed to be the biggest holder of Trump token, which is essentially a corruption tool. There's nothing more to it. This is pure cacocracy and corruption. So all these people are criminal, and they're stealing from you, and they're doing deals of self-enrichment for themselves. And they're transferring the tech to the Middle East. They're transferring a lot of the things that are American assets that were developed by Americans in America as if they're their own. And this is part of stripping the chandelier out of the Hotel California and moving it into the Hotel Dubai, Singapore, and Beijing. And it is a crime against Americans, because they're going to face the living standards that are going to be left with this huge debt, this huge inverted demographic of boomers, and a loss of buying power in their currency as a result of that debt. So debt devaluation leads to currency devaluation. They usually take turns, but then eventually when it comes hard and fast, they fall together. And that's going to lead to a massive gold price. It's barely begun. And to a significant down valuation in living standards in the US. And it's a tragedy. And it's not just the US, debt markets across the whole and the Western world is going to be part and parcel to this. And the knock-on effects will affect every nation of the world, including BRICS nations, but to a lesser degree. And they'll be the first to recover. So we're going to have a global depression. What they can do to make it happen faster: keep overspending. They're already doing that, the big, beautiful bill. Start wars. It's one of the most expensive things. It's a great way to overspend and for the insiders to steal from the citizens. So arms dealers are the hyenas of the carcasses. They make immense amount of industry, lives off warfare. And there's lots of intermediaries and lots of criminals and politicians' sons that get exceedingly rich for families out of the war game, because the end citizen is being charged a massive amount for these F-35 fighter planes, for example, which are nigh on almost, you buy 10, it's over 100 million a plane, 109 million if you're getting the aircraft carrier version. I mean, it's just so much theft. so much overpricing in that, so much debt that goes on the pile, that is an all overspending to income, is debt addition, and it's inflation. So it's currency debasement, which is a tax on all Americans. So a certain group get exceedingly rich, and everyone faces a tax of money devaluation. So the monkey on the greased pole, you've got to keep climbing just to stand still. So that's where you're at. In nominal terms, people think, how am I earning so much and being so poor? But in real terms, their incomes have dropped immensely. And that's at where we're at. What else could make it go faster? As I've said, beyond war, well, they could do something else like another pandemic, any number of resetty geopolitical events that you and I could spitball out. That would all lead to greater government expenditure, less economic activity. The tariffs have created a lot of uncertainty. They're going to create inflation, regardless of what Rutnick tells you. They had a low print on tariffs and on inflation, CPI, and they're claiming, you see, there's no effect by tariffs on it. You don't add a cost of government onto items through tariffing imports. That doesn't lead to a more expensive item for an end consumer. And what is the government doing with that money? They're sending record amounts of money to Israel and Ukraine to fight a war that leads to an organ trafficking business for the hyenas. It leads to a child trafficking and orphan trafficking, to all sorts of peculiar pervert pedophile rings. It gets dark. So war is the ultimate vampire feast for the insider cartel. And you don't hate them enough. You don't hate Blackrock enough. That gets the contracts to rebuild everything that gets knocked down. It's like me paying someone to dig holes and paying another group of people to fill in holes. It's nothing productive. If I'm spending it on your dollar and I'm debasing your dollar to do it, I'm wasting time and money and making you poorer by debasing the dollar to give phony jobs to people, the fill in holes and the dig holes guys. At least that's harmless and doesn't actually lead to population culls, males, particularly in warfare, females left behind struggling financially. They get turned into prostitute rings. Ukrainian women in Tel Aviv thinking they're going, to do au pair work, end up locked up as prostitutes without their passports. There's a lot of vicious abuse going on. You think slavery is dead, financial slavery is real, hardship is real, and it leads to some very, very nefarious gain. So that's where we are. I can sense more war coming, and I don't think the West is the place to see this out. And it can accelerate for any one of the items you mentioned or I mentioned myself.
Now, you mentioned just now, I mean, there's several things that I'd love to dive into. You mentioned about the West not being the most ideal place right now. Could you unpack perhaps what you feel is the more ideal place, so to speak?
Yeah, so there's, first of all, there's not a perfect answer. This is a very deeply imperfect world. There's not like, oh, it's easy, here's sound money land. There just isn't that many that have done that. Certainly, they're wanting money to crowd into the Middle East. And we're seeing a lot of the millionaires leaving the UK going to Dubai. I don't personally like the Arab Emirate nations and how they've run their world. They have suddenly found democracy. This was a very medieval, very family-based monarchy of absolute barbarism. They were not too long ago, teenage pregnant girls were being, even if they'd been raped, were being buried up to their heads and stoned. I was old enough to remember that. MBS chopped up a journalist in a Turkish embassy. So, those nations are absolute savagery. They're a fork in the chain with the other savage across the road from them in Israel. And those are horrible nations. But if you're going to just behave and keep your head down, economically, I expect you to do a lot better if you're in the Middle East, Singapore, maybe Indonesia, satellite nations to China without being in China, or in being actually in China. You may actually have more freedom in a peculiar way. There's certain books that are available in China that you can get the Chinese translation and the English translation that you can't get in the West anymore. So we are losing any notion of true freedom in the West. We're a capitalist nation that once was capitalist nation that's rotting with a ball of communism in it, and the others are communist nations that have assumed capitalist production, mercantilist approach that is seeing them come out of this financially better. So is there a perfect place? I say Southern Hemisphere if there's going to be macro warfare, because there's just not a lot of people that bump into each other in the Southern Hemisphere. South Africa's got no one to fight, the Zimbabwe, Botswana, Lesotho. Australia's a long way away from that. They're not going to fight New Zealand. Latin America, Argentina, Chile, these kind of places. And as I say, I think Indonesia, with the demographics they've got there, you'd have a young growing population. So those are probably better places than Europe, and its front with Russia and that crazy need to continue to antagonize the Russians, and the whole NATO game. So I would stay out of Western Europe and the UK for sure.
And then you mentioned kind of like totalitarianism, things of that nature. That's kind of where the world in European is kind of gravitating towards. And I've heard others on different shows talk about kind of like a cabal and things of that nature, whether it's like foreign bankers, things of that nature. I just had a curiosity, can you kind of unpack that, the nature of, I know you mentioned Blackrock and, perhaps some of these other individuals or companies. If you could unpack that, intrigued by that.
BlackRock loves totalitarianism. They even say so. Larry Fink says so. About how it's easier to get things done in China. In fact, Bill Gates said the same. You hear much of the same thing coming out of Bill Gates' mouth as you will Larry Fink. These are not people that are bringing you freedom. They are bringing the grid that will see them be gods over you. So humanity's been divided into the supremacists and the rest of the serfs that just need all their assets taken off them, the remaining assets that the supremacists don't already have. So, and corporate fascist organizations like Apple, Microsoft, BlackRock, etc., etc. I mean, I do laugh. It's worth showing you this diagram. I just had it up. Americans particularly, are being told how Bitcoin is going to be for their safety. Mm-hmm. And then we look at who's the holder of Bitcoin. The fairy tale that you might as well say Santa Claus to me, Satoshi Nakamoto. That is, without doubt, much doubt in my mind, the NSA stroke CIA Mossad operative who established this new digital form, holds 1.123 of Bitcoin. Let's say I'm wrong. Let's say it was a brilliant coder who was Japanese of nature and disappeared and never wanted to collect his prize or his money and just happens to have gone away, maybe died quietly and nobody knows. Let's say you buy the Santa Claus story. Your next biggest holder of liberty and freedom token, Bitcoin, BlackRock. Wow. Asset managers. This is the company that brought DEI, wokeism, transgenderism, that has people kneeling before football matches, that told you that George Floyd was a hero, essentially someone who probably died on his fentanyl that he swallowed after passing a fraudulent check, also known for home invasions and holding a gun to a pregnant woman's belly when doing so, part-time porn star. That hero, BlackRock made him, a statue. That's BlackRock. Binance, which is now getting its charges thrown out by the SEC by enabling Middle Eastern investment via the Trump's new special USD1 payment. Well, if these are your big holders, these are your avatars of hero. Strategy, the guy that was in the military and probably had one of the worst crashes, 6 billion lost in the 80s, 90s, in the dot-com era, who's now telling you, there's only one. Why you not sitting on many chairs? Why you should be all in on Bitcoin if you're prepared to sit on one chair. This is someone who debunks any form of portfolio. Everybody should be all in on Bitcoin, and there's no talk of privacy, securing. Never wants to get into those discussions, and says things like, we're sensitive when you talk about our founder and Satoshi. We're very careful. Oh, now that everybody can smell what a rotten nonsense story it is, and the fact that he's disappeared and nobody's ever been able to pin who it even was. This in surveillance finance world, where everything we hear, do, and is being listened to, scraped, devices, internet. So that's Michael Saylor, your next hero. My heroes are people like Ron Paul and Hayek, and people cautioning. You can be on Ray Dalio's side, or you can be on, Michael Saylor's side. I wouldn't say Ray Dalio's any saint, but at least he's talking sound money. Jim Rogers, Mark Faber, people that we've interviewed on our channel, that will tell you that we're going into a pretty dark space. Grayscale, these are your primary owners of Bitcoin. Fidelity, the US government. The only thing there that's not American and American Secret Service is probably China, and it'll be the Chinese Secret Service. Then you've got exchanges, Block One, Bitfinex. Also had Brock Pierce, who's been involved in Tether and had accused of kiddie fiddling. Kraken, Robin Hood. Like I say, the two words that pop for me there is Rob and Hood. These is probably one of the front-end feeder mechanisms for the classic hedge fund that never has a losing day, because it's taking the opposite side of retail traders. It's literally the platform for, I'm trying to remember the name now, someone will put it in the contents, with a C, that always wins, hedge fund that is regularly paying to all these mysterious quangos. If that's freedom, that Bitcoin is your freedom, then there's sure as hell a lot of thieves, governments, statists, and others that are bringing the big agenda on you being a slave, owning your freedom token. Maybe you should think about that a little bit more. So real freedom is real physical assets that you can hold, that has no custody reliance, isn't reliant on power, mobile network, which, funny enough, went down on 9/11 and 7/7 in London when you needed it most. That's right. So people need to wake up. People need to wake up. Gold in your possession is, for now, some degree of freedom. Coins, silver as well, for smaller denominations, and they will serve you in a period where the liar number is the inflation number. By the way, shadow stats, go and check out what the real inflation is, and that'll make it very clear that gold, if you divide it by shadow stats, has barely started. If we just took gold divided by their statistics, so not even on shadow stats, I don't have access to it. Let me go and throw this on for you. CPI AU CSL, that's all urban. We have only just broken out. We have only just broken out. And this is, so what are we looking at? The gold price, just so that everybody understands, divided by the BLS's bad number, according to me, that understates inflation, that is significantly lower than shadow stats, which is basically the original BLS number when it was Ronald Reagan era statistics calculation, maintained and brought forward through the years. So we've got that very steep line under here. This is the inflation. So even during bad periods for gold, it's not coming as low as it came in 2001. This is a huge, huge technical setup that broke really just the tail end of 24. Gold has only just begun a massive move. And the biggest part comes at the end. Everybody we're wanting to sell, they'll sell too soon. This is an ongoing next decade bull, by the way. If you look at the bull market here, that started in 1970, you peak in 1980. That is 10 years. And I'm here to tell you that this crisis is far larger, far bigger Then the 80s crisis, when France called BS on Nixon for his expenditure, carpet bombing the jungle, napalming the jungle, Agent Oranging chemical weapons testing, every dirty trick, just like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Japanese had already said unconditional surrender through back channels, but they wanted to test and make a statement to the communists. So Oppenheimer, of course, right at the fore, bombed two cities that were entirely civilian, entirely civilian. You can also go and research why those two particular cities. You'll find out something very interesting. But anyway, that's a discussion and research for you to follow out. But that's where we are at. So you're over a decade to come in this bull market. If we say, well, it started right at the lows here, let's get it right down there, 22, let's say, mid-year 22. You're at least to 32 if it's not bigger than the 80s move, where everybody called BS on the US the last time, only now we're much more indebted and there's way more nations involved in the economic system and the global trade. So that right there is your saving grace, gold.
Could you perhaps share some lesser known, topics that you feel don't receive enough attention, whether that's, kind of precursor events or things that might arise, or perhaps ways in which people can hedge against, this kind of debt collapse, if you will?
The sad facts, so this is, I don't know whether you want more of a trading and a financial vibe. We talk a lot in our community how to make money and shares and equities, but there's a social and geopolitical aspect to this that is horrendous. And it's the communists, it's essentially a communist, global communistic order that's coming. You're going to face a communism through a corporatocracy, which is fascism. Whenever companies are involved, it's a fascism with government. So when companies collude with government, that's called fascism, that bring about a communism for the people. That means serfdom for you or I. We get stripped of most of our value. Watching a Vietnam War detailed circular, Ho Chi Minh, everybody thinks, well, the North Vietnamese were the good guys. There were no good guys. The Americans lied. There was no good guys. It was dirty old war. When they had their revolution in North Vietnam, they took all the landowners, shot and chopped their heads publicly, and had their own laborers call court over them. That is communism. It requires barbarism and the strip out of the middle classes. It's the exact same the Bolsheviks did in Russia. It is murder and slaughter of the middle and upper classes. For the aspirational classes, they need to kill the middle, and they want the serfs, and then they are kings. That's what happened in Russia. 60 million is the biggest, between 25 and 60 million. It's over the period that went on. It was Georgian Ashkenazis that invaded Russia. It wasn't a civil war. These people got backed by bankers in America, Warburg and London, same people, to overthrow, control, and cause mayhem through the media, because the Tsar at the time didn't care to control his own media. It was actually a free media. And they went and they started trying to fester discontent against him. He allowed that to happen. There was a large white Russian who were quite happy with the state of the nation, and they were also slaughtered. It was a very close call. American troops were in the rural areas of Russia. Many people don't realize that during Bolshevism, to prevent rural people from coming to St. Petersburg and Moscow and swinging the war in favor of the white Russians who were pro their Tsar, were quite happy. He'd kept them out of wars. So the Bolshevik communistic murderers, and they did vile things to nuns. They put hot ashes in their orifices. They cut the back of hands of skinned and nailed priests, Orthodox priests. They were particularly violent to the priests, the religion. Where's your Christian God now saving you while we nail your hand to the altar and peel the skin over it? Called it the glove. You need the detail of the torture, of the viciousness of the communism. Communism slaughters. way more. You have these drama triangle of Nazism, the lowest common denominator by their controlling mechanism, Zionism, which Trump is, supposedly representing conservative values, standing with Israel, is a Zionist concept, and then the Marxists. That was kind of the woke ideology of the Biden regime. They keep playing you in these three triangles. If you criticize, you want self-determination, or you're libertarian, they call you a Nazi. But they actually funded the Nazi as well. They funded both sides in the war. They needed that war. It helped them establish Israel. You need to understand that these people are still calling all the shots, and they are butchers, 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 violent, aggressive murderers. So if you have financial change of such an epic level and you're in the West, you've got to wonder, is it the Western turn to get the Bolshevik communistic experience that occurred for Russia, that occurred in North Vietnam, and then they came down to Saigon with the folding of Vietnam, re-education camps and gulags in Russia. They had re-education camps in China. There's a lot of absolute wickedness, ideological brainwashing that goes with communism. And you've seen it. You saw it during CV19. You saw the totalitarianism. We are lurching towards a totalitarian society. I can't be more angry or disappointed with the trajectory of the world, but at the same time, you were born to live these times, and you're going to have this experience. So make it the best one and plan for it accordingly, and probably don't be around the most vicious, likely downturns, which is the West generally, and specifically in terms of the debt and the hegemon, America as well. That's going to be very, very costly to the quality of living standards that people will face. We will not recognize or believe the crimes that will be done in the name of government and new lockdowns, martial law, etc., that will come to once capitalistic nations that we thought were capitalistic. So it's a warning, and that's why I said I'm not doomsday prophet. I don't get off of it. I much prefer a positive message. Positive message is you're alive, the sun wakes up every day, your planet's not going to get destroyed. All those things aren't going to go away. You can live, laugh, and love, and you must do those things as if you have been given a year's lease on life. And only if you play it really well do you get an extension. And that's the way to go forward with this. Warn people. There's nothing good at the high levels. Government, debt, and financial systems. There's nothing good. They're all captured. They're all inherently evil, and they're waging war against you. That's part I'm not going to sugarcoat. But get organized locally. Get to know your farmer. Buy direct. Barter. Trade. Stack gold. Stack silver. I'll have some crypto, but it's going to be the likely rails of their financial system, only because I think it'll go up. And I'm pragmatic. Apple went up, and Nvidia and all these other tech oligarchs that are helping encircle us, Palantir and all these other corporations, they did not go up because I didn't buy them. So, you may as well make the money and build the wealth. But watch out for the great taking if you don't own shares. All these things are really useful knowledge. So that's my message for you. We are going to face a challenging time. Those that are biblical, that read Revelation, this is your revelation. This is mark of the beast. This is chip in hand. This is what they're going to want. Be very, very careful. Be very careful.
And as it relates to kind of hedging against what might arise, what might your advice be to somebody as it relates to their portfolio? I mean, perhaps how much should they allocate to metals or perhaps another asset class, things of that nature?
Over allocate to metals. I would say, listen, they're still selling online home insurance and your fire's already alight. But you can still insure. Do you insure for 5%, 50%, 100%, or 250%? I'd rather way over insure and have a better home after the fire's finished and make the claim. You can buy fire insurance still, and the fire's already started. Keep buying. You aren't big enough. You don't own enough gold. You don't. You just don't. And the way it's going to reward us, that's being said, it's going to do well if we can just get the bulk of the people even to own some ounces. They're going to be better off. So don't get me wrong, the price is going to move fast and far, but you don't own enough, keep stacking. Long-term food, as I say, get rural, get acquainted with your farmer. Those sorts of things are invaluable. Security, invaluable. Water and self-reliance on power and water, very, very valuable things, I would say. So you want to do all of that. Those are positive things, and they take action. And financially, if you own shares, get the share certificates. If you can't get the share certificates, I'm not prepared to own the share. You have a proxy and a derivative, and at any moment that could change. So you have a bet that could be closed out on you at any point. And counterparty risk, I'm expecting huge fraud on the brokers and the share certificate holders. Remember, they don't want you to win. They need it to be a bench system. They need to have all the ownership and you to have none of it. So if that's where they're taking you, then be careful of playing in that game. So I actually don't carry a lot on equity at the moment. There's some minors I would look at if you can get the certificates. There's very few, and I've yet to find successfully the minors I want to have actual pieces of paper. If you can't get a piece of paper that says your name and how many shares you have. So it's not a trader's game. For example, EDV, Endeavor, one of the many, we can see that going to $204. It's at 42 today. That's so much more to come. Imagine the cash generation. Other miners that we've already given to people inside our community that they have made money. You know, Orla, we gave this setup to our community. That smashed up to target very, very quickly. Let's just show you that. We said, okay, buy here, and you will get to, whoops, let's just fix that. There's our target take at 10. Now, you can pivot into Endeavor, or you can stay in Orlo. I think it'll overperform. But these are all setups using technicals that we provided that have made great targets. There's others in our community that we talk about. But remember, no share certificates. You can lose everything the minute they stop the clock. And it is 2 minutes to midnight. I don't want to be fiddling in the ether. Money in banks will be lost. Bank of America bought 500 billion of UST notes or bills. I'm not sure. Treasury, what duration actually? I think it was 10 years at when they were 1%. You know, you're now approaching 5. Those things have lost huge amounts of value. There is no real collateral out there anymore in the debt markets. The debt markets are failing. That means people can't borrow the way they used to. That means things that you have to buy using debt are not going to have the same price. I would sell all but your personal home. If you have Airbnb portfolio, you're a big landlord, oh boy, especially if you've got lots of debt on that, and you have 5 or 10 homes with just 10% down, and you're expecting holiday makers to be making your mortgage payments, boy, oh boy, I would deleverage, especially on the property market in the US. It's already getting too late, but take the first best deal, come in really underpriced, get out, pay off your banks, go. Consider it one less landmine. It's a controlled demolition. Don't walk through minefields at the moment. So miners good, silver miners good, gold miners, maybe royalty companies. We've looked at a few. We've got our favorites in the community. People can come to the market sniper, book a call, check out which ones we favor there. We've done a bit of a deep dive recently on miners as well. There's other industries that will go up, and there's also shorts for things that will go down. But banks, people should be speaking about the American banks. Boy, oh boy, with this devaluation in debt, if they were mark to market on their portfolio of mortgages, they would all be found wanting. We're running a bankrupt system. They're just waiting for the moment, that day they want to pull it all down. It's all so fragile. They just have to pull that one leg. The whole lot starts going into domino contagion. And banks and debt markets are right where the action are.
Well, Francis, I really appreciate you diving into this today. Of course, people can check you out at obviously the marketsniper.com. And is there anything else that you'd like to dispense to the audience?
No, look, listen. All this bad news. It's paper. It's lots of things. Get organized. Own some things in real sense. Land, productive things, and live a great life. You were born for these times. I think you're going to see unbelievable things, and not all will be negative. Some people will show incredible character. You can be a leader during difficult times, and this is your journey. So you were chosen to handle it. Handle it. It's an obstacle course, but don't assume that everything gets fixed this time. It's been reversed. The debt market is not in the same state that it was after 2008, that they can pull that again. The Fed can't buy. They're intervening. They can't buy every debt instrument themselves. Then everybody knows the game's up. So, prepare, be ready, and then live and love and be happy. Swim every day. I'm in the sea every day. Ride your bicycle, keep fit, keep healthy. There's still a beautiful life to be had. And that's what we aim to do: help people build wealth, preserve wealth, and at the same time secure freedom. If you can do those three things efficiently during these times, you're doing well. And consider big questions. Where do you want to see this out? It's a big discussion. And Market Sniper on the Twitter and on the YouTube channel. So we also cover the crypto markets under the Crypto Sniper, the YouTube channel, and the X. So thanks for having me on.
Francis, thanks so much. Quick ask: over half of you who watch the show regularly haven't yet subscribed. If you've enjoyed the show, you're finding value in it, subscribing is really the best way to support the channel. It's, of course, free. It literally takes 2 seconds, and it lets the algorithm know that this content matters. And of course, my commitment to you is going to be that I'm going to continue to bring on great guests, refine those questions. And of course, I'm always receptive to your feedback. If there's certain people that you'd like to have on, or certain questions, or this, that, and the other that you'd like to have as part of the show going forward, things of that nature, please let me know. I'm pretty easy to access. Anyhow, that's my commitment to you. If you can subscribe, that would mean a lot. Thanks.